Okay, so we're on the cognitive chapter right now for the early years, and the two main theorists in this chapter that are discussed is Piaget and Vygotsky. Okay, both of them were really influential, but they had very different ways of looking at cognition. Piaget believed that children develop in steps, so once they got to one level of development and achieve that level of cognition, then they could move on to the next step and so on and so forth. And really, Piaget's theories parallel really well, I think, with the physiology of the brain, because for each of the steps that he talks about, the physiological requirement becomes more and more elaborate. For instance, we know that when a baby's first born, its frontal cortex, which is the seat of higher functioning, higher thinking, is very thin. But when the child reaches these years, these early years, it thickens considerably. We also know that there's a lot of dendritic growth originally when a child's born, but when they hit about the 2-year mark, that stops, and then pruning occurs where connections become very specific. So what he describes in this stage of development just makes a lot of sense if you know about the changes that are happening in the brain. Now, Vygotsky is not so much into the whole developmental steps kind of thing. He's more continuous in his theory, and he talks about children being mentored by others, not just by like older people, but by peers as well. So children learn about the world, and they learn how to think about the world, and they learn how to do things in the world from others. Okay, so it's more of a social thing, and depending on the culture, that would dictate like what kinds of cognitive tasks are important. So in America, for instance, schoolwork is really important. We learn a lot from mentors about like how to achieve academically. But if you're living in like Peru or something, then it's going to be really important that you could, I don't know, make certain things that you can sell. It would also probably be really important if you're super savvy in selling items. And where are you going to learn that? You're going to learn that from your friends. You're going to learn that from your parents and stuff like that. So a really smart person in that culture may come across completely different than a really smart person from our culture. And that's something that Vygotsky stresses. Okay, so according to Piaget, kids at this age are in their pre-operational stage. That means they're before logical operations. And logical operations really are the kind of thing that happens in school. So math and deduction and induction, these kinds of processes of thinking are like part of logical operations, okay? However, the kid has taken a pretty big jump in cognition, because now not only can the kid move around and explore on its own and tell you what it wants to explore, but it's got language, right? And language really frees the kid from the limitations of sensory motor, right? Because the kid can express their feelings about stuff, they can ask about stuff, they can say, I want to see this, I want to do that. You know, it's a lot more, they're a lot more in touch with what's going on around them. And this kind of opens the door to symbolic thinking, because if you think about it, language is incredibly symbolic. You're basically saying that some object, the word, something that means some object is this word, and that's symbolic. And you can see that in their play. So their play becomes a lot more symbolic too. So they're capable of representational thought. So for instance, in drawing and painting, they may not necessarily draw a cat or a dog, right? They may draw some fantastical thing, which is symbolic of maybe their feelings or stuff like that. So their art tends to get more abstract and more imaginative, because now finally with the establishment of language, their thinking becomes more symbolic. And this is true in make-believe play. Make-believe play is super important for little kids. This is where they learn how to control their emotions. This is where they can act out like feelings that they have, anger, This is where most of the time they play with other little kids when they do make-believe, so they learn how to cooperate, they learn how to collaborate, they learn how to communicate, all that kind of stuff. But what's really interesting is before the pre-operational stage, from the 0 to 2 years, most kids just play like in mimicry. In other words, they see mommy and daddy doing stuff, so then they make pretend play that they're shopping or that they have a house, that they're the mommy in, or something like that. But once a kid reaches 2 and they start to get into all this kind of symbolic understanding, they don't make believe like that anymore. Instead, they take objects and they make them into something else. Like one thing that I really noticed with my kids when they were around this age is they loved boxes, because they could take those boxes and they could make anything out of those boxes, and they could pretend they were anything. In fact, it was weird. For Christmas one year, we gave my kids these really great presents, and they ended up spending all their time playing with the boxes that the toys were in as opposed to the toys. So that was a really good learning experience for my husband and I. But it's true, right? They really like that ambiguousness because it allows them to create, and that's what they like. Okay, so make-believe strengthens memory, attention, language, literacy, creativity, logical reasonings, insights into emotions. And it's really, really important psychosocially. Okay, so, this is kind of a cool slide. I love these pictures. This is something else that little kids tend to do from the age of 2 on up. They tend to give objects human qualities. Okay, so it's called anthropomorphizing. That's where you see animals or trees, or it could be anything really, and you attribute human qualities onto those things. So for instance, the little boy here, like, he's telling the dog like all his secrets. He's having a conversation with the dog. He believes the dog understands him just like his mom or his dad or his friends would understand him. And that's something that's really common because of this kind of imaginative, creative kind of play thing that's going on. There's another thing that's going on here, and it's called egocentrism. And we're about to, I don't know, maybe you've read the chapter already or not, but in egocentrism, you tend to believe that everything thinks exactly what you think, that there is no private thoughts or different way of viewing things, that little kids believe that everything and everyone around them feels and thinks exactly like they do. That's why it's called egocentrism. So here you see a little boy that is most likely being very egocentric with this dog. He's anthropomorphizing onto this dog so that this dog has the same thoughts and feelings that he does and completely understands everything he's trying to tell the dog. Okay, so we're going to go in and talk about like the limitations of pre-operational thought, and those limitations are what make this a really magical time. Okay, so first, they cannot perform mental operations. What do I mean by that? I mean like 5 plus 3 equals 8, 8 minus 3 equals 5, like that kind of thing. Like I said, there's a lot of egocentrism, and animistic thinking is like that anthropomorphizing that I explained. They can't conserve, and I'll show you what that is. And I also have a video up that will show you what this is as well. And they can't classify things. So that kind of classification that you and I take for granted, where we understand that, hierarchies of animals, mammals, and subgenre of animals might be like, I don't know, cats, and then there are different types of cats like lions and tigers and house cats, and then there's different types of house cats and so on and so forth. Those kinds of hierarchies they can't really grasp. Okay, so what are the true limitations? These are the obstacles to logical operation. There's centration, egocentrism, focus on appearance, irreversibility, and static reasoning. I love irreversibility. It's one of my favorites. Let me see. Do I have this? So let me go back. So what is irreversibility? A great example of irreversibility is if you've ever had to feed a child And let's say you've got like mashed potatoes, peas, meat, and gravy on a plate, right? And for some reason, the gravy gets onto the mashed potatoes. And you bring it to the kid and you put the plate in front of the kid, and the kid sees the gravy on the mashed potatoes and they say, "No way, I'm not eating that." And you say, "Why not?" And they say, "Well, because you got gravy on the potatoes. There's no way I'm touching that. That's gross." So then you reach over with a spoon and you take out the section of mashed potatoes that has the gravy in it, but that's not good enough, right? They still flip out. And they're like, "No, no, no, it's been changed forever and it can never be changed back." Well, that's irreversibility. When a little child sees something, it can never be changed back to the way it was. That's kind of also what static reasoning is, thinking that nothing changes, whatever is now has always been and always will be. So for instance, I'm Griffin's mommy. Okay, Griffin's my son. And when he was really little, he met my brother and my brother's kids and my mother and my father. But Griffin couldn't grasp the idea that I was somebody's sister or that I was somebody's daughter. No, no, no. I'm always his mother. So that's an example of static reasoning. Egocentrism is, we already kind of talked about that. And that's that inability to understand that other people have their own thoughts. When you read about theory of mind is something that develops in the later stages of the pre-operational kid. Usually very much into the operational kid. So usually around, I don't know, around 4 or 5-ish maybe. Anyway, so that's that inability to understand that people have their own thoughts. There's a video that I posted on the Blackboard. It's a theory of mind video. It really shows some great examples of that. Focus on appearance is very much the case with the conservation task, Piaget's conservation task, which I think I have a slide for, so I'm not going to talk about focus on appearance until we get there. All right, and that's the same sort of thing, and centration is also part of conservation. So let me see if I can find conservation. That's theory of mind. Here's conservation on the top. You see a little girl, she's got 2 glasses of liquid in front of her. And you say to the little girl, "Okay, which one of these cups has more? Does the one on the right have more? Does the one on the left have more? Do they both have the same?" And the kid usually says the same. And then you bring a tall but skinny beaker up next to the cups, and in front of the child, you take the glass and you pour the liquid into the skinny beaker, and you put the skinny beaker next to the short and fat one, and you say to the little girl, "Okay, which one of these has more? Does the tall one have more? Does the short one have more? Do they both have the same?" And the kid will always say that the taller, skinnier one has more, because they don't understand the conservation of liquids. So you'll ask the kid why, and they'll say because it's higher, right? So it's got to have more. Okay. The video that I have posted shows a couple of examples of this conservation error that little kids make, and it's pretty hilarious. I actually did it with my own kids several times over, and you can do it right in front of them, like a lot. You could do it over and over and over and over, so they can see you pouring the liquid into the higher beaker, and they'll still never get it. So that's kind of like focus on appearance, right? Because they're looking at the way something looks. They're not considering the operation that you did, okay? That you took the glass with the liquid where they knew how much liquid was in it and poured it into another. They don't stick with those operations. They stick with what they see and how they feel about what they see. That's in the video, so I'm not going to talk about it. And theory of mind is the last thing I'm going to talk about with respect to Piaget. Theory of mind is all about understanding that other people have different thoughts. The video is the best descriptor for this, but I just wanted to add on to this that this is why little kids stink at lying. Okay, when my kids were really little and they did not have a theory of mind, if they broke something and I walked into the room, they would always fess up to it. They would always say, "Oh, I did it," and that's because they didn't realize that I didn't know that they did get it, right? They don't understand that I'm not in the room with them, that I don't know everything that they know, and that they could potentially lie to me and say, oh, no, I didn't do it, Sarah did it, or the dog did it, or whatever. They don't get that. So they might be deceptive and they may try to manipulate you, but little kids are terrible liars, and that's because of this weird belief. So you should go watch those 2 videos now. That's a good time to watch them. But I just wanted to go over Piaget. I'm sorry, I wanted to go over Vygotsky. So Vygotsky is kids learn with guidance and collaboration with peers, right? So if you're going to teach a child how to garden, mom or dad is going to sit down and teach them. And if a child's going to learn about like something in school, like maybe one of their friends is reading at a certain level and they're not reading at quite that high a level, the older child can sit down with the younger child and sound out the words with them and help them read through it. And in fact, that's what happened at my house. My daughter is 10, my son is 7, and sometimes she sits down with him and helps him work out some of the more difficult words in the book. And that's an important concept as well, that yes, the child needs this guided participation. So people learn from others who guide their experiences and explorations. That's what a mentor is. But the task itself has to be within the child's zone of proximal development. So what does that mean? So remember when I told you that Sarah, my daughter, sits down with my son Griffin and helps him with those words? Well, if Griffin couldn't read the alphabet, then what she did with him would have been useless, okay? So the reason that what she did was helpful was because Griffin can read. He does know the alphabet. He does read at a lower level. So for him to try and sound out and understand those harder words is not impossible. It's within his zone of proximal development. It's something that he can tackle because he's got the rudimentary foundation for that. But if you try to teach a child something that they can't even begin to comprehend, then it's useless and it's not within their zone of proximal development. So Vygotsky says that people in different cultures learn from their mentors through guided participation. And these mentors can be anybody in society. It doesn't have to be their parents or teacher. And that for them to learn effectively, it has to be within the zone of proximal development. Okay,